Order. It's going to be City of Port Richey City Council Workshop, Thursday, August 27th. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's go ahead with roll call, please.
Mayor Scott Tremblay.
Here.
Vice Mayor William Dittmer. Councilwoman Jenny Sorrell.
Present.
Councilman Tom McClary.
Present.
Councilman Tom Kinsella.
Here.
City Attorney James Matthew.
Here.
City Manager Leonard Sossaman.
Here.
Thank you. Just to clarify, City Attorney, Mr. Matthew, no issues with Vice Mayor appearing electronically for a workshop as opposed to a regular scheduled meeting?
None whatsoever.
Okay, thank you. We're going to open it to comments from the general public, if anyone signed up. If nobody signed up, I'll see a show of hands. Mr. Mueller, welcome. Before you start, I'm going to lay a couple ground rules. We're going to stick to the only topic at hand, which is the budget. So that's the topic I want to stick to if we can.
Thank you.
Yep.
Dave Mueller, 5439 Blue Point Drive. I'm going to reserve mine till after the presentation, if that's fine. I think it's more appropriate. That way things will be not covered twice.
That's fine.
Thank you.
And I think that's the only person from the public that's here. That having been said, I'm going to pass it over to our city manager, Mr. Sossaman.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll hook it to my tie, so hopefully Councilman, our Vice Mayor, Mr. Dittmer, can hear me now. Hopefully, if not, he can scream out at me or whatever, and I'll try to talk louder. But first thing that is a budgetary item, but it's not going to have an impact on this budget, is back on Tuesday at our regular meeting. There's been a number of projects that have been on again and off again. One of them was the dredge project, and you all, and I updated you on that and said that I had already met with our engineering firm, Dewberry, and they were in the process of revising. We'd already gotten the FDEP permit extended to October of 2021. Well, just late this afternoon, based on my directions to the engineering firm, what they did was they went ahead, as we have to, since we're going to be seeking reimbursement of our CRA funds that will go for the dredge, so we're going to seek reimbursement from the county via their Restore Act monies. The firm has already sent to the county George Thomas, who is the engineer who's responsible and whom I was directed by the county assistant administrator to send those plans to, so we've already sent those off. So as I indicated to you this past Tuesday, we're on schedule now to be able to publish those bids and plans and specifications, if you will, on September 28th. If everything goes well, hopefully we'll get a number of bids, some that we can accept, and we'll bring that back to you on right after the 21st day of October. So we're on schedule there. Now, we'll see if I can confuse everybody before I turn it over to Mr. Zetline to my immediate left, if you don't mind. I've been, for the last, I guess, 2 months and a couple of days since I've been here, I have religiously had discussions with our city attorney, Mr. Matthew, about certain aspects of the CRA. Those discussions would be, how did the city determine, and when did the city determine to start putting some, well, I hate to say matching funds, but in some cases it was a matching percentage, if you will. The county would put in a certain percentage by state law. The city would also put in the percentage. So I've asked Sal, he went back and pulled some of the documents.
And to clarify, you're talking about a percentage out of our general fund.
Yes, sir. That's, of course, the county does the same thing as you. As an example, the county, they tax our residents here in the city just like the city does. The rates are different, but it's still a millage taxation. So the CRA was set up, if you will, as a self-help fund, meaning that whenever the county collects taxes from the citizens of Port Richey. Those monies go to the county coffers, and by law, they can spend them anywhere in the county they want. Not necessarily here, but they can spend them in Zephyr Hills, nothing against Zephyr Hills, but they could, or anywhere else. Ours, on the other hand, are self-directed. They're going to stay here in the city limits of Port Richey and be spent here for the betterment of the community and the citizens therein. Now, what I have found out in the last couple of days, and Mr. Zetline contacted the state for us, and I got back something that I found most interesting. I'll find it here in all of this paperwork I've got. We got something back from a tax law specialist with the Property Tax Oversight Program for the Florida Department of Revenue. Because every year George has to fill out something that's like a TIF form to send over to the county. Just to make it short and sweet, what it says is the amount of the payment to the Community Redevelopment Trust Fund is based on the agreement between the city, which is City Council, and the CRA, which obviously again are the same persons. You comprise this board, and you also comprise the CRA board. You have to vote separately and have separate meetings. They could follow each other back to back, but you just have to do it that way by law. The TIF form that is filled out previously and also now, it's not a mechanism for making the payments that you would have been making, the city has been making for years. All this really does is to help in calculating the rollback rate. That's all this form. This is the letter, and I'll be glad to share this with everyone here so you'll know. Now, what I've also went further, I called the Florida League of Cities. And after several discussions and getting them involved, they also, I talked to one of their attorneys who's a CRA attorney, and he also called in reinforcements from the executive director of the Florida CRA Association, who knew there was such an animal. I found out a few days ago. And what they did, they gave me their opinion. This is there's no requirement under state law, under that 163 chapter, that requires a city to also fund, from its general fund, its CRA trust fund. The county still has to, but you don't. And we went back to find the original documents. Now I've got, we can pull the document that was adopted way back in '02. And I think the reason it was probably done back then because the expectation was that in year one, the revenue stream, and I know our numbers guys will love this, the revenue stream back in '02 was projected from the county to be $100,000. And they talked about, well, we'll sell bonds. Well, that's fine, you can sell bonds. But a bond counsel will tell you, Mr. Matthews here, I know he doesn't really do bond attorney work, but they usually tell you have to have a coverage ratio, meaning that there's got to be a revenue stream that's going to be sufficient enough to cover the bond payments. It could be a 1 1/4, but normally on something like this, because of the variation from year to year of those sales tax revenues, probably the expectation was it'd be 1.5%, meaning that if you brought in a revenue stream of $100,000, you could sell $62,000 worth of bonds. That way you'd have 150% coverage. So I'm sure what they did was, this is real skinny. We're not getting anywhere fast, and we want to do some improvements in our city through the CRA funds. So that's probably, I haven't found that in writing anywhere. That's just my supposition. Long story short, the budget package we gave you 2 weeks ago, tonight, we can really change because that one was predicated on putting the city's share along with the county's share of general fund revenues that are, and you got to remember, under your current situation, because it's not restricted. Once you set the tax rate, you start collecting those tax dollars that are in the general fund. That's not restricted. However, when you roll them over into the CRA trust fund, they become restricted. So what I'm asking for your consideration is let's not do that. It makes more business sense to keep that $960,000 that we would take out of next year's tax collections and put into the CRA, which already has over about $1.8 million in it. So why would we compound our general fund reserve deficiency by doing that? I don't think that makes good business sense. Now, that doesn't mean you have to give back the money that the county puts into it. We continue that. You've got a CRA redevelopment program. You've got a project list. That's been approved. You can amend it. So I would say let's move forward with the budget. And I know there was a lot of disconcern, a lot of consternation about a 1.5 mil increase. I understand that completely. Everybody in the room pays taxes of some kind, somewhere, somehow. So my suggestion would be, let's not put that $960,000 and change into the CRA. Let's keep it in the general fund. That way it's unrestricted. And all we have to do in the future, whenever George or whoever his successor might be fills out that TIF form and they do the rollback calculations, on that line where it says CRA contribution, just put in a 0. As a matter of fact, previous boards, instead of putting in that percentage that the county had put in and that had previously been put in by other city councils, one year they put in something like $17, which was legal. Another year they put in $1,000, again, which was legal. So it's entirely in your hands. Now, what I would suggest is, if you agree to this tonight, our first meeting in September is September 8th, is that at that point in time, Mr. Matthew can put together I call it a dissolution resolution. And what I'll explain, this board would have to adopt a resolution to say that if there ever was an agreement that went beyond 1 year, because the only thing we could find were updates that were 1 year in duration, so they died, they had a sunset. And we're way past that sunset. So if this board would have to adopt, along with the CRA board, so meeting back, if you will, you could adopt that resolution to dissolve any agreement, if one existed, that would require such a contribution. I hope I haven't confused everybody.
Let me ask you this. So really there's no downside to not funding the CRA with our funds, because if we wanted to utilize that money from the general funds to a CRA, what could be a CRA restricted project, we could still do that.
That's right. You could still go back and fund CRA projects from the general fund if you wanted, so there's not a downside. You don't lose anything. And I knew there were some folks that said something to the effect that the county had lost $1 million or $2 million or something. Well, it wasn't lost. It was just buried and restricted in some restricted funds. And what we've been trying to do, and I say we, George and Becky and me, is trying to figure out a way to unrestrict those restricted funds. And we have found a mechanism to do that, and it's totally legal. As a matter of fact, I found when I talked to the attorney up in who's with the League of Cities, and he told me his interpretation, and he also told me the interpretation of the association. I asked, he said, but I can't put it in writing because we don't do legal opinions. I said, well, do you know anyone that does who's an attorney in the state of Florida? Sure I do. The attorney who represents the Florida CRA Association. I've already had a couple of conversations with him. I've signed an engagement letter, and he's going to provide us that legal opinion within the next few days.
So we can rely on his opinion?
Yes, sir. We can rely on that opinion as well as the one from the State Department of Revenue, from one of their tax specialists.
And can you forward that to us?
I'll get that to you.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
And so Sal now has in his possession, and what's in our CRA files, some things that Jim has successfully dug up in the last few days. While we've been, like I said, I've been driving him nuts, asking questions about why this, why that, as it pertains to CRA and pertains to general fund. So I think we've uncovered the reason.
That's part of it. If I remember, it was a $1.8 million variance. That's about half of it. I know that there was a wish list from our utilities and water to upgrade a lift station. That was coming out of general funds. Is there any way to shift that around to some other funding?
Yes, sir. That lift station will be the Olsner lift station, and it's definitely overworked, undersized, and Jim can correct me again if I'm wrong, our city attorney, but to upgrade it, to enlarge it, you can use impact fees. And obviously, part of our sifting through the monies that you've got sitting in reserves was to try to ferret out the percentage or the dollar value, if you will, of each one of those different ones, because it was one account. And so what we would do after October 1, once we get through this budget process, is to set up a separate CRA trust fund a separate fund for your general fund, which is your tax dollars and so forth, and then also one for water impact, sewer impact. Can't forget the police department because they have some impact fees and fires and stormwater as well. So we'd probably have a half a dozen, 8 maybe, different funds. And I think from that perspective, it would be easier on this board as well as our successors going forward to make right recommendations. Because, for instance, if Councilman McClary or any other councilman called me up and said, "Lynn, how much money have we got in sewer impact fees?" It's just a matter of looking at that fund, as opposed to looking at that large pot and trying to decipher how much is in there.
Yeah, but that lift station, we can utilize other types of restricted funds, I would think. Between
Those are.
impact fees, we have stormwater fees we've collected for a long time. I don't think we've used them for anything.
Right.
So we can use some of those fees instead of out of the general fund for that project.
Absolutely. Sean and I have already talked about how are we going to use impact fees from a couple of different sources that are in his domain without using general fund dollars.
And the last figure that I saw for the impact fees, I think we had right around between $700,000 and $800,000 in surplus, not surplus, but reserves.
Reserves for water and sewer impact fees,
Okay.
yes. And it's my understanding, since you did vote, while we're on this subject, which relates directly to the budget, the question came up Tuesday night when we recommended you consider paying cash for that fire truck, $532,000 and change. And we're doing that. We're going to lease the 6 cruisers for the police department. And I know the question was, well, can we afford going forward if the chief and captain come back, next budget year and say, oh God, we need not just 2 but 3. Can we afford to lease them or buy them? Yes, you can, because even after doing this truck, I think I'm right here, is that we'll still have about $800,000 currently in that pennies for Pasco that will be unspent. Now, some of it will be committed, obviously, for those police cruisers, and we can still move forward with the vehicles that we need for public works and utilities. So the money's there. Like I said, it was just a matter of figuring out how to determine what was in each one, or what should have been in each fund.
So let me ask you this hypothetically then, because if I remember the numbers, and I'm working roughly here, we're talking a little over 900,000 that we put into the CRA that we don't have to, we can utilize for general. And then we have another right around 500 for the lift station, which puts us at 1.4 mil. That still put us 400,000 or 500,000.
But you're mixing two different funds. The lift station's coming out of sewer impact fees.
Correct.
Right. And so you're still going to have, you'd still have, if we pay 500,000, and I think you've got 200K or so, the CRA monies, with the money coming from the county, I think right now we've got about 1.8 million in that fund, if that's what you're referring to.
Let me clarify. We were, I think, around 1.8 million deficit in the general fund.
Okay.
So we've rectified that to the tune of 900,000 for the CRA and another 500,000 for the lift station, which would have been 1.4 million.
Right.
So that leaves 400,000 to rectify. So I assume that we still need to deal with a potential tax increase to cover that, what's left there, correct?
Right, and hopefully we can go through that. And I've
Okay.
had some questions.
Let me go
I had a
through it,
question
yeah.
earlier from a council person who should remain nameless. I won't call her by name, but anyway.
Okay.
You've got a sheet in here that will show you what an impact of I think it's a quarter, a half, and 1 meal, and a 1.5 meals on different levels of house values in the city. And we did it so I think that would probably be a good explanation for everybody.
Okay, so we'll readdress that just after the presentation so we have more information.
Right, and I can shut up and let George walk you through some of his revisions, if you will.
Before we do that, we had comments from the city manager. I wanted to follow protocol. The council hasn't really had a chance for any kind of comment, so I wanted to open the floor for any preliminary comments before we get into the presentation. And I was going to start with Vice Mayor Dittmer, if you had any questions or comments before we start.
I'm sure we're probably gonna cover it, like you just discussed, it looks like about a 400,000 shortfall. Taking account the tax increase and the freezing of the budget to last year's rate, I think that would cover us, but I'm sure that's what we're gonna go over.
I believe so, because I have the same questions and issues, but I wanted to wait till the presentation, so if we can, we'll dive back into that.
I'm
Okay.
sure we all have the same questions, but thank
Correct.
you, that's what I have.
Okay.
Let's move on. Sounds like good news.
I have one question, and you may cover it as part of the presentation, so if you are, just say, well, we'll get to it. In the 813 agenda, we had the actual 2020 estimates was significantly lower than the 2020 budget. And using like general government fund, for instance, you had actual 2020 estimated was around $1 million. We had 1.49 budgeted. And when we were talking, I said, well, let's bring it down to the actual 2020 spend. In the new document, we bumped up the actual 2020 spend to $1.4 million. What is the reasoning? And I'm just using the general fund as an example, but it kind of carried all the way through all of the other various departments. Why did we have that discrepancy between the 813 workshop and the 827 workshop in terms of actual 2020 spend?
Okay, well, basically, one of the main things is, and we'll go over that later, is remember when we did the 813 budget that I told you there was only $109,000 in reserve? Well, from moving the money over from the CRA and everything else we've been doing, and also a lot of cuts by department heads in that, we now have a reserve of $1.7 million in the general fund. So by $1.7 million, it's going to increase the bottom line of your general fund budget by...
But that would be for the 2021 budget. I'm talking about the actual 2020 spend.
Okay.
The estimated actual 2020 estimated is
Right.
that column. That shouldn't have been affected by the transfer of funds of the $960,000.
No, well, when you're talking about the actual, when we went in and looked, you asked for an update of what were we going to spend from then until the end of this year through September 30th, and compare that to what's budgeted in the 2021 budget. And we did do that. I have some pages in here that shows the comparison between what was going to be spent for the rest of this year, for the whole year, compared to what we're asking for next year. And some numbers went up, some numbers went down. It was just a matter of going through them all, each of the department heads and that.
So the actual 2020 estimated from the 813 workshop was as of 813 as opposed through fiscal year end?
Right, because that's what you asked me to do, to bring it through fiscal year end, and that's
Okay.
what we did.
All right, that makes more sense. All right, thank you for clarifying.
Sure.
Ms. McClary, is that all you had?
That's it.
Okay.
I have nothing at this time.
All right, fantastic. What we're going to do is move on to the agenda. And the only item that we have for council business is the review of the Port Richey proposed operating budget for 2021. And I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Sossaman.
Thank you.
Okay. Hands free. As I indicated, I only view that backdrop and let you know how we could become very close, and then with maybe a small millage increase, not one and a half mills, you could do a lot to correct that situation. So I hope you're still considering doing what I've suggested, and I know you'll let us know sometime later on in this meeting. And what I'd like for George to do, he's updated some of the presentation that Mr. McClary mentioned, and I'd like for him to walk through that, and hopefully that's going to answer some more questions for you tonight. If I could turn it over to George.
Okay. All right, well, I was going to start off with a presentation about talking to the community redevelopment funding analysis and tax increments funding, but I think that Mr. Susserman explained that quite thoroughly, and that seeing that we're not going to be able, we don't have to fund it if we don't want to fund it, there's no sense going through how the funding would take place unless you want me to explain to you how the actual funding is calculated in that, but I don't think at this time you really need that unless you want me to explain it.
I think the only thing important number is the bottom line number is the 967,000 is really the number we're talking about funding or not funding to the general fund.
That's correct. And as of right now, I moved it back to the general fund as a reserve, depending on what you want to do with it, into the future.
Let me clarify one thing, if I may.
Yeah.
Is that something that we have to vote on for that portion, or Mr. Matthew, can we do this by consensus, or how does this work when we deal with some of these specific issues in the budget?
I'm not sure if you're asking me on the city share of TIF funding, or are you asking me on the budget overall, or both questions?
Kind of both. I
Okay.
didn't know if we have to vote on each issue
Okay.
or just overall.
Yeah, with regard to the TIF funding, it's very complex, and the bottom line is, depending on this opinion we get, we've chatted about it and what we're going to do. I'm extremely comfortable. I spent about 3-4 weeks of research doing this, and so comfortable we're going to do it. We will probably prepare a resolution, as same was done in 2009, in which just for that year it was $17,000, not $17, but compared to the $500,000, it's a little amount. But we'll do a similar resolution reflecting the fact that we're not going to put in our proportionate share, because we didn't have to from the beginning. And they amended the act, by the way, back in March. The bottom line is that will come to you at the next council meeting, okay? I think, yes, and then at the next council meeting, we're going to have, depending on what you do today with this budget, we'll probably have an executive session regarding, the union issues, and then we'll do the council meeting and vote on that, and then afterwards I'll do a 5-minute CRA meeting to vote on it from the other end. So bottom line is that will be resolved. We're pretty confident about it. The three of us have spent considerable time researching this. And so with regard to the budget itself, what you do here is you can't vote at a workshop. So let's say at the end of this, you say, okay, we're good with what we have. We want to go with a 1 mil increase, and you're comfortable with that. There'll be a couple other issues that Mr. Sassman will bring up. You just do it by consensus, and then it'll be set for the formal budget hearing. If you feel another budget session is necessary, then you need to discuss that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I appreciate it. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. Just the one other thing, I also had looked back to find out, and over the last 5 years, actually, the city had put $2.3 million into the CRA over the last 5 years. So they have contributed quite a sum of money to the CRA that now that it's in there, that money's restricted. We can't really go back and take it back out again. But moving forward, we can make the decision to do we want to fund it in the future or keep the money in the general fund as unrestricted money. And then should we ever decide to add some of it to the CRA, we can do that anytime through a budget resolution or something during the year. Next thing I want to talk about, because we were asked the last time about our FTEs, the number of full-time equivalents we have in the city right now. You have two charts there, one the current and one in the proposed, and really there's only one big difference here in there, is that we want to break out the finance department into a finance and human resources department. You'd still have 3 people there, but 2 people would be in finance and 1 person would be in human resources. Basically, all the other levels of the FTEs are the same. We're not adding no new positions to that, or or changing anything else around. So that may be something you may want to discuss later or now, if you're okay with creating the HR, Human Resources Department, and breaking it off between that and finance as separate departments from now on. That's that. And then also, still not included in this budget is there's no employee raises proposed as of yet. That's something we need to talk about and something the board may want to take some action on. Also, we did not fund the 3 additional firefighters, because at the last workshop on that, the board said they didn't want us to fund those extra firefighters. And if we break it out, it would cost about $180,000. Additional $153,000 coming from the general fund and about $27,000 coming from CRA, should you want to add those new 3 firefighters. The next thing here you have in your presentation is we did a breakdown of on the percentage of the raises and that, if you stayed current, of course, there'd be no increase. If you had a 1% increase, it would be a total of $44,696 overall, of which $27,000 would come from the general fund. A 2% raise would be $55,000 from the general fund, $89,000 overall. 3% would be an $82,000 increase to the general fund, $134,000 overall. 4% increase, $110,000 to the general fund, $178,000 overall, and a 5% increase would be $137,868 to the general fund, and $223,482 overall with all the funds. So that's something else we want to discuss. I don't know if you want to do that tonight, or you want to do it in a closed session when they talk. I don't know. You might want to kick in here, Jim?
My suggestion is, once you go through the whole thing, I won't let you forget by the end, okay?
Okay. That was that. Now we're going to talk about the millage rate, just to bring you up to date on that. The 1.5 mil increase amounts to about $444,000, just shy of $445,000. If you went up only $1.25 million, it would bring in $370,392, but then you'd have to have a reduction somewhere, or reduce your reserves down $74,079. If you go down to only a $1 million increase, it brings in just roughly under $300,000. Then you'd go ahead to reduce your reserve by 148, or cut some more out of the budget. If you only want to do a 3/4% increase, that would bring in $222,000, and you'd have to decrease your budget or decrease your reserves $222,000. If you only wanted to go with a $0.5 million increase, it would be only $148,000 additional money coming in, and you'd have to offset it with a $296,000 reduction in reserves or cuts to the budget. If you just wanted to go up a $0.25 million, you would only get $74,000 additional money coming in. This is, of course, the general fund we're talking about. And you'd have to reduce the general fund $370,000, or reduce the reserves by $370,000. Or if you left the millage rate the same with no increase, then we'd have to either decrease the general fund budget $444,000, or reduce the general fund's reserve by $444,000. So that's just a little scenario of where you stand on what you want to increase and how much you want to increase and what it's going to cost. I talked to the property appraiser today, and basically he's telling me that the average homestead property in Port Richey is roughly $229,007. The average non-homesteaded property taxable value is $257,142. So you can see there from the little graph we put together that you got the current tax rate. If you go up $0.5 million, if you go up $1 million, if you go up $1.5 million, how it would affect houses at different amounts. $100,000 tax with a taxable value of $100,000. We have there going up in increments to a house with a taxable value of $250,000. And if we wanted to go exactly what the property appraiser gave us, the numbers on the homestead property of $229,000, at the current rate, they would pay $1,324.69. At a $0.5 million increase, $1,439.19. At a $1 million increase, $1,553.69. And at $1.5 million would be $1,668.19. And there's the same thing for a non-homesteaded property, depending on which millage rate you wanted to go with. That's what the taxes would be on that piece of property. Okay. Next thing here on the reserves, we're showing, like I said, originally there was $105,000 in the proposed budget for the reserves. Now that we've moved the money back from the CRA and did some other adjustments, there is now $1,072,925 budgeted as reserves in the general fund. If you wanted to get to a 25% reserve, that little over $1 million there is about 18.5% reserve. If you wanted to get to 25% eventually, which would be the norm for a city on the coast and things like that, with the different things, possible hurricanes and that, you really should have close to $1.7 million in your reserve. So yes, you're short, but not as short as you would have been if we didn't come up with this extra money. As you see, water and sewer, they would only need about a 2-month reserve, because if you're looking at it in the general fund, you say 3 months because your taxes don't come in until December. So you got to get through October, November, December before your tax money comes in. On utilities, they got water and sewer bills coming in every month, so they only need maybe a 2-month reserve, to have in their books and everything. And as you can see, water and sewer has more than enough. They have over $2 million in their proposed budget for reserve. And the minimum would only be $584. Stormwater's got $64,000 at a minimum of only $58,000 they would need. So the only fund really that's short of where we should be for the reserves is the general fund. But again, with what happened in the last day or so, we've made great strides in improving those reserves than what they were in the past. Just a couple of, and I think Mr. Sossaman alluded to this earlier, there were 2 additional changes that don't show up on your sheets you have in front of you. One is that we're now going to purchase the fire engine completely out of the penny for Pasco, and instead of leasing it over a number of years, we're going to play it outright at $535,000. It's still going to leave you reserves in the penny for Pasco of $834,000 in reserves. So we're not spending down all our penny for Pasco, but we still have sufficient money there to do other things with the police department and things like that if we need different things. The general fund, again, we talked about that. If we don't fund the CRA, or if we keep the money in the general fund and fund the CRA at a later time, that's why our reserves are increasing just over $1 million, which is putting us in halfway decent shape, a lot better than we were when I first looked at the budget. The next thing here, what I did, and you can, didn't put slides because the numbers would get too small and everything like that, but you do have it in your packets there. The revenue changes between August 13th and August 27th. There weren't not a major change. There was a lot of redistribution. What happened is, when I first came here and I looked at the revenues, as you remember, there was about $6.2 million sitting up in our trust funds up at, I don't know if it's held at the state but it's not held around here. And basically I was going off a spreadsheet that was supplied by a prior finance person doing some work here, and I used those percentages, and as I went back and looked again, excuse me, at that, I actually looked at the trial balance for the beginning of this year and the trial balance of what it is today, and those were not the numbers that were in each one of the funds for those reserve monies. So I thought it best to go according to the trial balance and not according to the percentages that were worked up in a spreadsheet. And basically that's what we did. We moved the money around, that's why it changed so much. Like the general fund, it was 7.9 million, then it went down to 6.8 because $1 million we thought there would be about 2-point-something million dollars of that 6 million in the general fund. Well, no, it turned out there was only about 1 million of that reserve money, that money in.
Let's back up a second here.
Okay, go ahead.
So the trial balances didn't align with what the previous finance director was stating was present in the funds.
Was what he had, what the spreadsheet he developed and the percentages he had in there did not agree with the total amount that was in each fund's trial balance for the money that's up in those invested accounts.
So let me ask a question. Have we done previous research to see what populated his spreadsheets? Obviously, he started with a number from somewhere and then went with a percentage.
The problem is we have not been able to talk to him, and he no longer works for the firm that we are dealing with. Well, I couldn't really sit down and discuss with him, how did you come up with this spreadsheet? And where did you get these percentages from? So I figured I'd go to what the trial balance is, because that should be the more correct figure. That's what's on your books right now, and I'm assuming that is the correct numbers that are in there.
But
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, Jim? Yeah.
Great question. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
yeah,
We're waiting for that question. It's a good question. I'm not patronizing you. We've discussed this, the three of us, at length. Approximately, I set the budget 4 years ago, and I set the budget in a certain way because I was looking for those monies because it didn't make sense to me. I think to give some credit to Councilman Dittmer, he's the one that said, Jim, I like the way you're showing those figures, because the reason I did that, is when we got about 85% through the year, I could calculate, since all our revenues were here, I knew we were going to be real close and what the number would be, short or overspent that year. Then I counted all the reserves and restricted funds, added them all up, and I did that with our accountant back then, which to come in twice a year, and we had too much money. So when the consultant came in here, I sat down with him on two issues. One was, look, I'm not an accountant, but these numbers don't work for me. And I approached him at the end of the year, and I discussed that with Mr. Lupo. And he says, yeah, it doesn't work with me either. I said, well, what's going to take to get to that number? Where can we start a trial balance? Because I think he never got to it. And so he had to start from scratch here, George, and we didn't know. But so George backed into all the figures. There was really no other way to do it. And then with regard to this issue of the $1 million, which was the matching fund or whatever, we had addressed that issue also. It's been carried over a fund, but we never paid it. Some years it seems like we paid it, some years we didn't. George had to back into those figures. So the answer is there's no way to determine that outside of going to a point in time right now and verifying the reserves and verifying exactly how much we have in unrestricted reserves. And he's getting to a very close figure, but you know, the numbers are starting to match. I don't know if that helps at all. That's about the only.
Well, it does, but it actually opens up more questions.
Correct, it does. Go ahead.
We have no way of tracking how much money is in our funds at any point for the past.
Going backwards, no, but George has got plans.
I understand. I'm talking about going backwards to where we're $1 million short right now. I'll say $1 million short.
Yeah.
And we don't know if the $1 million was there or if the $1 million disappeared or was spent or however. We can't track the money in our funds for the past 4 years, 3 years.
It was probably happening before then and most likely linked, and I've had numerous conversations with George, to this money the city was supposed to pay over to the CRA, and then this never paid it, and that got mixed somehow with, we didn't spend all the money in the CRA that year. So when you took what we were supposed to put in as a matching fund, add it to the other figure, and then spend less, but then never pay it in, that's what George was
Then we have
trying to
another problem because you have budgets that were council approved where there was supposed to be a transfer of funds from general fund to CRA fund that never occurred within the budget.
And never picked up by the auditors, that's what we.
And never picked up by the auditors
Right.
and supposedly approved by somebody.
Exactly right. Can't figure that out. George and I have been trying to figure that out since.
Well, I think we owe a big explanation to our residents where a bunch of money has gone for the past 4 years.
Well, it hasn't gone anywhere.
Well,
yet.
I mean, it's moved.
Yeah.
We can't, the fact we can't establish where the money is means it's gone in and of itself until we find it and say, yes, it moved from point A to point B.
I'd have to.
I'm not saying anyone stole anything.
No,
I'm not
no.
going there. I'm just saying we don't know where our funds are, and that's a big problem to an overall budget perspective.
Yeah, I'd have to let George answer that.
I was going to
because
say, yeah,
he's
the bottom line is we are accounting for all the monies, we just don't know what money belongs in what fund. That's where the problem is.
So the
Because
CRA may be right now represented as overfunded, but it may not be.
It may not be. We may be using water and sewer money in the general fund, which should not be being used, but because you have one big pot of money with all this money in there, and there's no way to decipher where it came from or how it got in or out, and that's what you have to go back the best you can. And what we're gonna have to do, at least what I would like to do, is starting in October, is separate bank accounts for every one of these funds.
That sounds like a brilliant idea.
I mean,
It is, and George is absolutely right. There's actually 3 accounts because you have what I call an operating account down the street at PNC. But then you also have those 2, as George mentioned earlier, which we hope to be reserve funds that, were driving us nuts, because what really killed us at first was we only saw a reference for one of those transfers up to that that Florida class fund, and then there's another one that's got a similar name. We only saw one. We said, what the heck? We thought we had $6.5 million, whatever it was. And so with further research, as you suggested, that's where we found the other tranche that was transferred up. So that's when we felt a lot better because, it's like somebody said, well, money's lost. Well, it's not lost. It's just the problem is that when it all goes in to those three different funds, and it's all, I'll use the word commingled, if you will. Once it goes in, since money's fungible, who knows what came from a confiscation fund, what came from water and sewer, what came from CRA, what's general fund. But George has been going back trying to do some forensic accounting, which is what you're saying, to try to establish a game plan. And I agree with him 100%. He and I both know that you ought to have probably somewhere between 6 and 8 different funds for those different accounts. And then that way, you'll never have this problem again.
Each fund should be its own account.
Yeah,
That way the bank tracks what money goes in and out, and you're done.
Right.
I mean, that's the way I did years ago when I worked for the city of Crystal River, was like over 20 years ago. I mean, I had like about 15 or 16 bank accounts. Well, these statements come in every month. They're really not hard to balance, just a regular bank statement to balance, and it was real simple.
So how long will it take to implement something like that?
Once we determine what money is supposed to be in what fund, it's just going to the bank and setting up the bank accounts and having those monies transferred into those different funds. And then from there, you work forward, and as bills come in to be paid, as Becky knows, we have a checking account, and all you do is say $1,000 was spent by the general fund. Well, you take $1,000 out of the general fund, put it into the checking account. How much water and sewer? Maybe $20,000. Take it out of there and put it in the checking account. So this way, those accounts all stay separated, and you transfer the money in, and it's all electronic transfers anyhow you do it. So it's real simple nowadays to do it. So, but that was the redistribution on there, the revenues. There weren't any revenue changes that occurred except for that redistribution of the funds that we kind of tried to clear up a little better than we have. Then you got your expenditure changes, what's happened between August 13th and the 27th today, and basically, as you can see, looking at them, a lot of the changes, because we went in and I went in and talked to each of the department heads, and we sat down and looked at their budgets. And as you can see in the general fund, I mean, just going down by each department, I mean, some of the big ones, I mean, general government, we cut $64,000. The police department actually went down $154,000. We went through there. Fire department, $194,000, different from what we had at 813. So I mean, the department heads really made an effort to go in and cut their budgets back and only go to bare bones of what they needed to operate with. Because before that, on the 13th, I didn't even get a chance to sit down with any of the department heads and go through their budgets line item by line item. But that's what we did here. We went back and went through them line item by line item. So we were able to do, and the only reason, originally on there, it shows that it dropped $1 million until I made the last adjustment this afternoon and picked up the $1 million in the reserve into the general fund from the CRA, which now would cause that -$1 million to go up to a positive number of changes, only because we brought that money back from the CRA into the general fund. But a lot of the individual departments made substantial cuts in their budgets between the 13th and the 27th. And we can go through that for all the different funds. The CRA fund, there was really no changes there. Penny for Pasco, there are changes now because the fire truck and things like that. Most of the other funds are small funds and not much was done with them. If you go back to utility fund, that went down $433,000 between the 13th and the 27th. Stormwater utilities went down $188,000. So we did make substantial cuts after talking with all the department heads and coming up with better numbers. So, and this is a summary. Also in the back here, you have individual pages for each of the departments, each of the accounts and everything. So if you want to question any of the ones in particular, we can go back there and pull up those sheets, and we can talk to any of the department heads you'd like to speak to here, and they can go over any of the changes that you want to talk about and everything. So we have that, and the only other thing I had, I guess, I think that's because we're going over the changes for the fire truck, and then the changes in the general fund because of bringing the money back from CRA. The rest of the packet here, like I said, is all what you're looking at is the 2020 budget, actual the estimate of what we're going to spend for the year in that particular budget and line item, and then comparing that to the 2021 proposed budget. So like I said, if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them for you, or we have a number of department heads here that'll be able to answer questions if you'd like.
Thank you. At this time, I wanted to open council for any kind of questions specifically, I guess, department heads. But it looks like each department head made cuts, so I'm comfortable with that unless there's any specific issues any of you guys had.
Oh, I got questions. But I'll let anyone else go first.
Yeah, I have one real quick. A couple months ago, we had a assistant city manager leave. What became of that FTE?
Basically, I guess originally, let me go back to that. I know that Mr. Sossaman wants to eliminate that position. Let me go back here to administration. They had 2 positions plus the interim city manager, which made 3. And I guess there's still 3 positions there. Is that, who do you got? Yeah, it's just you and Val, right? And Sal, okay. So there's still 3 there. I don't know where the assistant, to be honest with you. It can be. No, the HR actually came out of finance, so, because there's 3 in finance, and now finance has 2 and HR has 1. So that was that switch there. We still got the 3, so I guess, I mean, we probably forgot the, or the assistant city manager. I'm sorry we did that. My fault. So if that's the case, then we are reducing FTEs by 1. Because then it should have been the assistant city manager would be there as 1 position. So that would make the 3 4, and we're only going to 3, so that would be eliminating the assistant city manager, if I'm correct.
Where would that salary disappear or add to?
The salary, basically, it wouldn't be there when we put the budget together for 2020, for 2021. There would be no salary there for that position. That position was just eliminated, so we didn't take that into consideration when we put the budget together for the FTEs and the costs of those positions.
Right, Mr. Kinsella, that position, since it would go away, and as George indicated, that's not, that should eliminate 1 out of admin. And what it would be is we're not gonna be attributing any type of expenditure for it, since based on what I was told earlier about when the mayor put me on the spot in my first or second meeting and asked me what I would do to reorganize them, and also it came up, I think, from Vice Mayor Dittmer, that there had been discussion that we didn't need an assistant city manager for a city this size. And so if we didn't do that, and that's when I suggested, well, you know what, at that time, we were without a finance director for like 19 months. So I suggested what I would do, since you're having problems finding somebody who's a director of finance and HR, because even though there's some similarities there, they just, and I've called several recruiters and other folks, and they just couldn't believe it. So that's why I suggested splitting it and having a finance director and an HR manager. And so that salary would not be plugged in as an expenditure. It would still be in general fund, but it would be deployed by this board based on your decisions, your decision at your final budget public hearing and your adoption of the next year's budget. It would be probably be in reserve somewhere.
Yeah, because if you look back on the backup here for Department 12 administration, and you look at the end here, total administrative department expenditures, that in the 2020 budget, it's $427,000, but in the proposed budget for 2021, it goes down to $263,000. So if you look at the personnel line items, and most of the personnel line items have dropped down. Like in the general fund, the salaries went from 137 down to 98. In the CRA fund, they went from 82,000 to 46,000. In water and sewer, they went from 79,000 to 51,000, which shows that, yes, there's less salary and wages being budgeted for. So I would assume that's the deletion of the assistant city manager not being there. That's where the savings are showing up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
don't have to go all at once, so we can go to Mr. McCleary. We can come back to you at some point if you need to.
Okay. In the general fund, I was looking at our liability insurance, and it has gone up 44% from the actual to proposed budget, and 140% since 2019.
To be perfectly honest, liability, that's really, it's a figure that we have no control over. I mean, we deal with, I think, the Florida League on our insurance and stuff like that, and when they come and give us the figures, all we can go by is the figures they give us. There's really no way. I mean, if you want, we could probably shop around with insurance companies and that, but, that's just what happens in life. I mean, we've had the same problems when I worked for the county about our liability insurance every year. I mean, they have the commissioners always questions it also, and it just goes up and you really have no control over it.
So this is a quoted number for the upcoming fiscal year?
Yeah, that's what, whatever, I think, I just lost her name now. Becky, not Becky, Tony. Tony was dealing with the insurance company, I think, and that, I think she can.
So it's a set number.
Yeah. Yeah, so they're the ones that give us the figures.
Okay. There are a significant number, again, they're small dollar values, but there are a number of increases in the general budget from estimated through actuals, from 2020 actual
yes, there
to 2021, 30%, 50%, et cetera, in some line items. Again, they're not big line items, but why did we bump those as opposed to locking them to the?
Well, again, I sat down with every one of the department heads, we went line item by line item, and they had to justify to me why they needed extra money. I mean, up to one example was, and I'll be perfectly honest, was training. A lot of all the department heads are requiring training for their employees that are under them. I mean, some of them need certain licenses, they have to get this, pass this license, get this license, and those prices have gone up, and there's, they've justified why they need to do that. And basically, if you look back in the past, almost no training was ever, there was almost no training done over the years. I mean, you can ask the police chief, you can ask the public works director and that. I mean, very little training's been accomplished here. And now that we're getting back on our feet and you have new people in the positions of the department heads, they want to put some training in there and get their people trained.
And on that, as George has indicated from training, if I may, Mayor, Mr. McCleary, for instance, we're weak. When I say weak, it's so we don't have the personnel with CDL license. And if you've got a certain weight vehicle, they have to have a CDL license. And so we're going to have to pay for that training. The people have time to do it, but we're going to have to pay for that training since it is a job requirement now. It's in their job description. Also, water treatment people and other people that deal in the water department, they have to have a water treatment license. So it's the same type thing. And the study materials, in order for them to do that, it's not the least expensive thing in the world. It's not, not like $1 million or anything, but like you say, it could bump it up substantially. I think the police training budget was something like $2,000 for that department, which is fairly insignificant. Get any police officer.
Yeah, now it goes up to 20,000.
Yeah, so he wants 100,000.
No,
he does want more money. You're absolutely correct. Yeah, I'm just, and of course, the thing has come up a number of times from I know from Councilman Kinsella about a boat, and so I know right now the what Chief found we've got penny for Pasco money, so we're looking at shopping for a better boat to be able to handle some of those water-related issues out in the river, if you will. So that's going to probably be coming to you sometime in the next month or so. Once Chief Robinson finds a boat that is suitable for his purposes.
One more question, and you may not know the answer to this. We paid $47,000 in bank charges last year.
That's correct, and we know about it. We're looking at it very carefully now because we're looking at, it's maybe gonna cost us up above maybe $70,000. And one of the main things that the bank does that we're probably looking at taking it back in-house is utility billing. And Sal's looking into that right now, possibly about taking that back in-house because it'll be a lot cheaper. Plus, a lot of the bank charges, we've been questioning the bank, why this and why that, and why is it going up every month? It may come down to a point we may want to change banks at some point in time or get a better deal with another bank, local bank, possibly. But yeah, we noticed the bank charges, yes, it stuck out like a sore thumb.
The red light camera fees, we have an estimated of 272, and then we're only budgeting 230. That's actually higher than previous years, even, it's actually been all over the board with this. How did we estimate the red light camera? Or
It's
WAG?
It's just basically a gut feeling. If you look back at each month, how much is being collected over the number of years, and trying to do some kind of estimate or extrapolation out there, and it's just a figure. I probably put it in there that, you know, this is what we figure we're going to do the rest of this year, and this is probably not as much next year. I mean, that's like a crapshoot sometimes. You can ask the chief on, maybe you got some better explanation on that.
Looks like you averaged the past 5 years, basically.
Can I weigh in on that issue just for a minute?
Sure.
It's going to go down because one of the issues we have is, I think we normally allow people to have hearings when we're not able to do the hearings because of COVID. So trying to enforce some of these tickets may be more difficult. So I would think that that number is probably going to go down, at least while COVID is still.
Yeah, the only thing that might mess with that a little bit, if you will, Mayor, is the fact that Jonathan McGuire, our magistrate, as you said, has not been having hearings because of COVID-19. What he'd like to do, and he's been in contact with me a couple of times. I've got an email I need to go back and chat with him about. But if we go to the next phase, I guess phase 2, in terms of things here in the state, he may be able to start that back in September. I believe he's indicated he'd love to do that. So he may have a backlog, if you will, which might have us an infusion of cash, but then it's going to probably, like you say, drop back off.
And what the court system's doing is they're staggering hearings. So rather than have a mass docket with 50 hearings, which is what used to happen in the city on those, is we'll set 10 hearings for 9, 10 for 10, 10 for 11, and then just stagger the hearings out to accommodate the social distancing.
I think that would be much better on our staff. The police department's obviously involved, admin through Sal's involved, as well as some other folks. And so we've been having some discussions about how we're going to handle that when they do get cranked back up. So you're absolutely right.
One last item is software maintenance contracts. They've gone up 150% in the general fund, 200% in the police fund, and plus we have an IT that actually went down somewhat, but our professional fees went up. What's going on? What's the driver for those?
I don't know, maybe, Becky, you maybe know more about it because you've been doing more work with the IT stuff than I have and everything.
There
That's
is
big, sir.
$14,000 that's paid for the new CAD system. Part will come out of the police department, part will come out of fire. That's going to be yearly annual maintenance. We have Black Mountain, our software that we use for building, finance, everything. We have those maintenance contracts. So those are all basing on what we've been looking at and adding in the additional $14,000.
Well, okay, so we have the 15,000 budgeted in the police, but we're also in the general fund then increasing to 12,000. Are we double dipping?
That's probably, I'd say probably the 12,000 is for our software and everything, not the police, because they have their own software.
Yes, the 14,000, 11 is coming from PD, 3,000 will come out of fire. Fire also has, because they're in the general fund, they have software maintenance contracts for some of their programs that they use that are fire related.
And by double dipping, I mean just hitting two different budgets for the same thing.
Yeah.
No,
Oh.
General,
because there is probably there's software maintenance on the programs for finance and for some of the general fund departments, where the other one for the police department is strictly for police or fire for the maintenance on their equipment, where we have maintenance on our programs that we pay out of the general fund.
I'm strictly looking at increased percentages from actuals, year-over-year increase percentages, and when I see 150%, it makes me ask the question, or 200%.
That I would have to look into and get a list of exactly what is
Can-
coming out of that. I
can-
don't know off the top of my
Yeah.
head, but I can
Can
get a list of it.
can I ask a question that may flush the answer out?
Sure.
Before we had a CAD system, we didn't have maintenance fees on our computer systems. With the new CAD system, I think it costs a lot more money.
Yeah, and
Well,
that's covered in the police, so that explained the 200% per
Yep.
police. I have no problem with
Oh,
that.
okay, I thought that's what you were referring to.
Yeah, no, this is for the general fund. There's another 150% increase in the general fund, in addition to the 200% for the
We'll go back,
police.
we'll get a list of all the maintenance programs this year and next year, and then we'll get them out.
I'm just trying to make sure that
yeah.
we're not
Yeah, well-
double tagging
Right.
and running through, that's all.
I agree, and we'll get them out to, each one of the council people, so they can see for themselves where the increase is and what software and what it's just costing us.
I'll let somebody else go.
I wanted to go on that note. One of the, I think, biggest criticisms when COVID started within the city, which I agree, is the city's ability to get information out to the public, I think, was lacking. One of the things that I think that our city could do better to alleviate that issue is potentially have a part-time IT person that can update our website, Facebook, whatever, whether it be for different departments. And I think for a little bit of money that we could probably find a part-time IT person, the benefit to the community and to the city would be great. It'd be well worth it.
If I could tag on that, we have $80,000 budgeted in professional IT services, so there's quite a bit of money within that line item to bring something back in-house.
Right, but that's what I was suggesting. We don't have anyone here that actually does it.
Yeah.
We have Big Sur that's an outside source that promotes into our computers to do IT work. All we have to do is send them an email or a phone call, and they can promote into any computer that we have in the city and do updates or fix things.
But I think what he was gearing towards is the ability to hire someone in-house, so you maintain that in-house as well as do website and other, I don't want to speak for
Correct,
you, but-
correct. Someone
Yeah, I think
in-house
it's-
that,
I can check with them to see if that's something they offer.
But again, that would be in addition to this $80,000 budgeted line item then.
Right, yeah.
So that,
Yeah, you're kind of looking for a webmaster type person of that.
well, it'd be a webmaster, someone familiar with webmastering and the ability to run the rest of the systems. And for $87,000 last year, $96,000 in the budget, and $80,000 overall, not to mention all my maintenance contracts that I keep harping on. There's probably
For
funds,
contracts and more programs.
I'm kidding.
yeah, but despite that, it still wasn't getting done. That was the concern.
Yeah, correct.
So that was just one of the concerns that I had, and whether we can do it within the same budget or whether we need someone in-house to do it, just for that specific issue in terms of, like I said, information on our webpage, information that as things happen within the city, so we can keep our citizens informed. That was a concern that I had, and I wanted to address it on the IT part of the budget, because I think that's where it needs to come from.
Well, I know since we've got a lot of questions, I know Councilman McClary had those questions about the software expenditures and the increase, so George and Becky are gonna pull those and we'll get an email out to you within the next day or so that will give you those numbers. And then also at the same time, we'll take a look and see what we could find for 80,000 or 60,000, whatever, relative to a potential webmaster or someone that could do either part-time or full-time, whichever, and bring that back to you as well.
Thank you. I had some broader issues, but I wanted us to get through all the different line item issues first, so I was going to pass it over to Councilwoman Sorrell for any.
Okay, we'll look it up. Yeah.
I like the idea of getting someone part-time in the IT because I think
And we-
I'm, I'm pleased to hear that we're moving forward and we're doing some really, really progressive financial changes that I think is going to help the city and our residents an awful lot. We're going to be able to give them answers quicker because it's going to be much more simplified.
Yes. And keep it simple.
And we had a vice mayor as well that's not here in person, but are you still here electronically?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And excuse me, everyone, if I'm redundant on some of these things, but I don't have the paperwork in front of me. I'm trying to make notes. On the last meeting, we discussed the chargeback for administrative fees to the different funds. I was wondering if that was calculated into any of the new budget constraints.
The only thing that's calculated in there is a lot of the salaries in the departments that overlap with other departments, like finance, right? We do work for utilities, we do work for, CRA, things like that, part of our salaries are being charged out to that and everything. What I would look to, instead of doing it that way in the future possibly, is, like I mentioned the last time, and I've been trying to get a hold of them, there's firms out there that actually do cost allocation programs that actually would come in and do a study and say, okay, there's a rational nexus how we can go ahead and charge X amount to this fund, that fund, and the other fund to bring more money into the general fund for services that are provided. And it's not just salaries, it's also operating costs and different things like that. So, we'll be looking at that. Once I can get a hold of these people, like, I think some of them are working from home now, because every time I make a phone call, I leave a message, and sometimes they get back, sometimes they don't get back. But yeah, we're looking into that in the future of finding out more ways to bring into the general fund to cover the cost of general fund employees doing work for other funds in the city.
Right. So my question is, when you say in the future, that's not something that we're going to make into this budgetary process, but it'll be pushed out to future budgets?
Hopefully, we'll get something started on that right after October, right after this new budget goes into effect. We can start working on that and maybe even bring it in during the next fiscal year, but definitely have it ready for the following fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. That's the only question I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thanks.
Something else that I was looking at, and there's probably a reasonable explanation, but I'm just more curious as to what a Johnny Cash donation is.
You took my thunder.
I thought it was a singer at first, I'm sorry. But,
What I have found out is that it's Johnny Cash, there's a Johnny Cash house here in Port Richey, and I've actually been driven by it a couple times. And since he had a house here, he actually left some funds set up in Port Richey as well as Newport Richey to go toward the police department and for their betterment, or for lack of a better term, it could be called a police benevolence fund. There's about $116,000 or so in it, and it's also, there's some references to it in the PBA contract. And I've had some discussion here recently with Jim Rice, who is a vice president with the Police Benevolent Association, and also with Officer Esposito. And what needs to be done is a committee. There's a reference to a committee set up. I don't know that one's ever been set up, Councilman, but we're looking into the protocol to set that up so that they can decide on an annual basis. I've actually heard that the amount that could be spent every year out of it was based on the interest. But as we all know, this is sitting in the bank down at PNC or even up in the trust fund at a third of a percent interest, $116,000. You can't even have a party. But we're going to figure it out, and we'll let you know more about that. But there is a fund, and it's called the Johnny Cash Fund.
And the one other is all the cell phones that I've seen, seems like every department, there's cell phone charges. I'm just kind of curious.
True.
well, I guess everybody carries cell phones for that.
Yes, all officers have cell phones, department heads have cell phones, fire department has specific cell phones. Some of the cell phone charges on there that you'll see under PD is air cards for the laptops that are gonna go within your CAD system. We have to pay, it's like a SIM card that goes in your cell phone, so we have
Thank you.
I have some more questions. For the police, holiday pay has almost doubled since 2019 and represents a, 71% increase over last year. What would be the reasoning?
I'm gonna have to look into that. I can't give you an explanation for that at this point.
Okay.
It wasn't something that I had delved into at this point.
Same thing for health insurance. We're basically 80% above 2019 and 30% above last year.
Increase in premiums and just the healthcare costs, just like anything else goes up, is what I'm gonna.
30% in a year?
Is what I'm gonna say.
Okay.
I think that happened to us last year, and we had to shop around for a while to try and get a better rate, which we did.
Yeah, and then we're another 30% from last year.
No, I understand. So
Yeah.
I don't know if it's time to shop again. That's what I was getting
Oh,
at.
okay, yeah.
So, if I can comment on that, I remember that we had
Excuse me?
very
This is
high
separate health for the
claims
police.
rate
No, no, it should be health for everybody.
And I believe
It's not
we
separate
get
for the
to
police,
next
it's
year,
health insurance
so
for all
we'll
county
reevaluate.
city employees.
But it's coming out of each.
Yeah, but wouldn't it carry from last year to this year would be my question. Like, we're in the higher bracket, so theoretically, we'd be paying 2019 rates for 2020, but we're going, again, a 30% above 2000. If it's just a bracket thing, then that's fine. It's,
When we had all the claims is when our insurance went up, and as our employees have become healthier in the last couple of years, I think we're doing a little bit better, but I think we're still in a high risk type area.
yeah, I'm just trying to see the 30% a year increases, because that is substantial for any,
I think we'd all
across
like
any
to
business.
understand insurance increases.
Are we gonna have a bicycle going again? Are we gonna have a bicycle, officer on a bicycle?
Well, I would hope so.
Oh.
However, the issue is we're down 2 officers right now. So right now, patrol is gonna be our primary function.
Okay.
And then, once we get to full staff, we'll look at that aspect of operation.
He doesn't want, he does,
Do we still
he
own the
doesn't want
bicycle?
motorcycle cops, I know
We're
that.
paying $250 to fix it.
What'd we do to it? If we're not using it?
It's hired,
Oh,
just maintenance, regular maintenance for whatever you're
tire
gonna
rot
do.
from lack of use?
Nice bike.
I wanted to know if we can move on to a couple different issues that I wanted to touch on that I think are going to be probably more global issues that we're going to have to look at. One of them is the potential increase of the overall taxes. I saw that there was a breakdown that you had put together for us. The question that I have is realistically, what are the odds that we could increase taxes in that 0.75 range and still meet all our costs in the general funds and still not dip into the general funds, if you will?
Well, you probably have to dip it to, right now, say you went down, right now, 1 mil runs about roughly $300,000. So we're going up $1.5 million. Say you went down to 1 mil, that means you cut $0.5 million off of there, and that would be roughly $150,000. Now, the only way we could do that is we could go in and reduce the reserves in the general fund, which now you got 1.7 million, so it's not going to hurt that much to take 150,000 out of those reserves. Where it would hurt more if we went back to each department head and say, okay, now we want you to cut more money out of your line items. Because I think we got them down, pared those amounts down pretty good. But we can do it either way. If you want to reduce the millage rate, we first look at what we can do to reduce some of the budgets. If all budgets remain pretty stable and there's nothing we can do, then we would just reduce the millage, the reserves, because we do have 1.7 in there now.
You said 1.7 in the general fund. I thought we were down to 1.0 in the general fund.
No, that-
1 million in the general fund of reserves.
No, it's, since we brought the money over from the CRA, that we're not giving them the 900,000, that created the extra 900,000 coming into the general fund reserves. That's what I'm saying, that's one of the ones we changed this afternoon.
Well, yeah, I know about the 967,000, but maybe I missed something here, because right here, general fund administration, funding increase reserves to 1.072 million. This is additional changes.
I think
So
that was before they were,
No, that's city not required to fund CRA, funding increase reserves to 1.07 million.
Right, 1.07 million. We had 150,000 there, 159,000.
But you said 1.7 million.
Well, I'm sorry, 1,070,000 then. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
so then, so if we lowered the millage to 1.0, I'll say for argument's sake, then our reserves would actually go to 850,000.
That would go down
Plus or minus.
approximately about $150,000, yeah.
Okay, so then we would be lowering our reserves under the 1 million mark by quite a bit, by
Right.
15%.
Right, or we could look into, like I said, we can go back to the budgets again and see if we can chop some more out of it. I mean, it's gonna be a little hard to do, but if that's what we're looking to do, we would try to look at that first, and then when all else fails, then we'd go to the reserves.
well, the other question in terms of that is, I know that we were looking to utilize some of our money, for example, impact fees for some of the other projects that were in there. Has that all been calculated in?
That's already budgeted in.
That's
already
what I was
budgeted.
trying to figure out, okay.
Yeah.
Now, you gotta remember too, that as of right now, there are no raises at all for any employees in the budget.
I was going to get there in a second.
Yeah.
I was trying to sort this out first because I'm trying to find a way, and I'm not okay with not giving employee raises if we can get around it. So the other question that I had is, we have a lot of restricted funds that are still out there. Are there any way to shift some of the employees that are actually working in the utilities over to utilities funding, which will free up some of the money out of the general funding if that hasn't been done yet?
I don't.
I think you've shifted all you can shift.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't.
we could take a look at that, but, you know, we have to be careful with what we do. For instance, restricted CRA monies, it says you can use it for administration and overhead, but then when you get beyond that, you get into some areas that would probably get real squishy, and we'd be advised by our attorney not to do it, because that could get us in trouble, particularly since we're undergoing that audit right now.
Right.
But the other funds, we'll look and see. I can talk some with Sean, have him to take a look with George maybe the next day or so before we come back at the first, well, at the next meeting, or at the, because we could actually talk to you about it at your regular meeting on September 8th before the first budget meeting, I think, which is the 10th or the 11th. So we could do that, and look, there may be some spillover, I guess, between the duties of the people in public works versus the ones over in utilities. So we'll take a look at that. That might be a way to squeeze some money, if you will.
Because I'm suggesting if we can shift some salaries over to unrestricted funds instead of general, I think that may free up some money, because, you know, getting to employee raises, I'm a proponent of employee raises. Our employees work hard for us. In my humble opinion, I think that the employees deserve at least a 2% raise this year. And that's just my humble opinion, but I want to make sure that we can shift our finances around to be able to do that.
If I can make a suggestion,
Yes.
go back and find between $148,000 and $222,000 in savings out of expenses. Employee funding, that would bring a millage rate increase between 0.75 and 1.0. Employee raises could be funded out of general fund reduction of about $55,000 out of the general fund, which still would allow us over $1 million worth of reserves at that point. And then everyone is somewhat happy, or equally miserable.
We'll use that as our goal.
If we could do that, I would be real happy with the budget this year.
You got that, George?
And that's just my opinion. I don't know what the rest of the panel thinks about
No, I totally agree that we need to take a look at the raises for our employees with everything that we've been through, the country's been through, and our employees have stayed right with us. We can't forget about them.
Well, I haven't had the first employee yet that I've had to give a direct order to. I ask them to do something, and it's like they take that as an order, if you will. And I know you've had the experience in policing, and so it's always good when they do things like that and follow the chain of command. And I get reports from them constantly. I see Dallas almost every day, sometimes more than once a day. Sean, I get a report usually in the morning and in the afternoon. So I think we're making some really good progress with our departments and what they do. I know the police chief, I love to pick on him. He's a great guy. He disappears on me. Not really. He's there. I know he's there. He comes over, he salutes. He gets me one of those Navy salutes that he got a long time ago. Can't get over that, right, Chief? So I think you've got great staff, and so I don't blame you for wanting to be able to take care of them. And I know they'll appreciate it. I've had not a berating, but a lot of times they'll ask me, "What do you think? What do you think about raises this year?" And I said, "Well, we're working on it." So if they're watching tonight, they'll love what you're saying.
And I wanted to go over to our vice mayor to weigh in on those two issues for the tax rate increases versus employee raises, and what your take is on those kind of issues as they interplay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On a lot of ways, I agree with Mr. McCleary on finding this extra money. I think there are ways that we can pinch a little bit there. But I do believe three quarters is not enough. I think a minimum would still be the 1 mil rate, stepping back to 1.5. And I think a combination of finding that extra money and that 1% will definitely help us out.
Their goal is 222, their minimum is 148. Let's see where they can hit.
Right.
We understand.
Gotcha. Then you're looking at 2% raise for the employees and possibly a $500,000 reduction, or for the 1.5, bring it down to 1.
I was saying from the 1.5 tentative rate to 1.
1, gotcha.
I'll comfortably disagree and say go for more.
And the idea is if you cut expenses a little bit more and we wind up with more in the reserves, that's not going to hurt my feelings either if we can go that direction. But I know that's
We don't want to
mission.
be in the same position down the line either.
Correct. So, but I don't think we will. If we're going to start funding, not having to fund the CRA as much, I think that over the years we should come out a little bit better.
We can adjust that in the future.
Correct.
I want to see Len find me $222,000, and then we can figure out what to do with the other $50,000 from there. $60,000.
Because what
$70,000.
the 2% raise shakes out to what, about 70,000? Is that?
Yeah, well, 55 out of general.
55 out of the general fund, actually, it's 89,393 out of
All of them.
All the funds.
salaries are being paid out of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Councilman McCleary is great. He's sitting here directly opposite me right now, but we agree on a lot of things. And I know he thinks I've got a magic wand, so I'm gonna see if I can get it and see if it's got some dust in it.
It's only numbers, you just cut them.
That's right.
Councilwoman Serrano, did you want to weigh in on those issues? Are pretty important issues.
We have tried in the last several years to try and assist our employees and have failed miserably on some years, and they haven't gotten anything, and they've still stayed with us. So we really need to do the best we can to find the money so that they can have an increase in their I think they've suffered just as much as anybody else has during this COVID virus thing, and I think we should really take that into consideration.
So is it a consensus that we're looking at a 2% raise?
If he finds me
finds
between
the money.
$148,000 and $222,000,
If he
yeah.
finds the money, we'll do it.
Okay. So we'll set that as a goal, and we'll come back and see what we've got. And those are all the issues that I had. I didn't know if you guys wanted to go back around again.
I'm good.
I'm good.
I am as well.
Okay. So with that, I'd be looking for a motion.
Do we need a motion?
Oh, wait a minute, someone deferred their time, so I did want to invite Mr. Mueller up.
Before that, could I speak, I think?
Yeah, of course.
Procedurally, 2 weeks, September 8th, I believe, is the next council meeting, is that correct?
That's
2
correct.
days later is the
That's correct.
first full budget hearing?
Correct.
Okay. September the 10th is your first formal, you will present to the budget on the 10th, okay? That'll be 2/3, 2 weeks from now. That's when you're going to approve a budget. You have to be prepared to approve a budget. So you can't come here on September 10th and make a decision then as to what you want to do.
So we need another meeting.
Yes, sir. And so you need to do that or reach something in between. With regard to the issue of the wages only, I'll be coming to you before the next meeting and asking you, are you comfortable enough with the numbers that you want to give a raise? Because that's a separate and distinct contractual issue we have to decide. And so we'll talk about that in executive session and vote on it on that day, which is no more than 2 days before the hearing, and that's as close as I can cut it. So your decision to give a raise needs to be finalized before that Thursday formal budget hearing, and I'm going to make you do that 2 days before. So now if you want to have another budget hearing, you've got to have it before that Tuesday.
That's what I was going to suggest is, I think that we've made a lot of headway in the last couple budget workshops. Are we able to have another one maybe
one
as it
next
gets
week.
closer?
What you actually could do, since our city attorney just said he wanted to have a closed session with you before your meeting on September 8th to talk about the PVA and the CWA contract, what you could do is after that, obviously you're going to go into your regular meeting on the 8th. What we could do is put an item on that agenda as opposed to having a separate workshop, that you may or may not want to do. You could actually have it included in your regular budget meeting on the 8th as a separate item. It may protract that meeting, but that's okay, because I know everybody's time is valuable. Several of our members work in other locations. So that's just a suggestion. You could either have a separate one next week one day, before Labor Day, obviously, or you could have it on the 8th, which would be the week after Labor Day.
On the 8th, we're going to have the workshop, it's going to be the union negotiations. We're going to have the regular council meeting, the CRA as well, correct?
Yes, which
So-
takes 5 minutes, but what Mr. Sossman's attempting to explain to you is you can discuss these issues, okay, at a council meeting. You don't have to have this is an informal workshop, you understand what I mean? You could just have your first agenda item on that meeting as this and make your decision then, unless you feel you'll have to make it then, because 2 days later it has to be done, or do it next week. What he's saying is you can do it as an agenda item.
Well, I think as they have time
It's
to
up to
work,
you.
as they have time to work, they're doing pretty well with what we're asking them to do. I would suggest that we just put it on the agenda for the 8th, and then we'll be ready to make a final decision on the 10th.
The risk we do run into, though, let's say hypothetically they don't hit our targets, then we have a different issue which may prolong that, and we don't have a lot of time at that point. That's the only thing I'm worried about. Let's say they can't find the money, or we have a lot of discussion points, and then additional work has to happen in between. They only have 2 days to slap together an approvable budget, or an approved budget, I guess I should say.
I guess that's the problem. I think what you're thinking from what you're saying is, well, they'll give us 2 days for them to come up with the final. It's not like you can, when they bring that to you on the 10th, you're voting yes. If not, you're in a lot of trouble. You're not going to be able to change it. It's
I
right
would do
there.
a meeting next week, and that way we have some more time, in case something falls apart. Well, now, I guess the question is to you guys, how much time do you need to go through and try to hit our goals? Is 1 week enough time?
Do the best I can. Give me 1 week, I'll take 1 week.
Why don't we set another meeting for this time next week?
For Thursday.
For Thursday, we're Thursday, right? Yeah, Thursday, thank God.
Well, next Thursday, there's a conflict with CAC meeting.
Well, without a
This is
budget, there's
Thursday.
no CAC, so.
So what about Wednesday, the 3rd?
Well, now we're shortcutting them another day even.
Well,
Or
Well, we can-
Friday
we
the
can-
4th,
What time's your CAC meeting?
7.
Do we want to do 6 o'clock next week?
Well, can they shift the CAC just back a little bit and we'll
Yeah,
go early?
you move to 7:30 and we go to 6:30 or 6.
I think they'll be more than happy to.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah.
So next Thursday at 6?
At 6 if we can.
Want to do 6? Yeah, let's do
Is that
6.
good with everybody?
Excuse me. You
Oh.
talking September 3rd?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, because I can't make that date.
Can you phone in
I won't be here.
at all?
No, I can do Friday. I'll be back on Thursday, but I don't know if I'll be back in time for a 6:30 meeting,
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
Well, the other suggestion is if that's the case, and I understand the vice mayor's position, that, you know, in terms of working and being traveling.
Well, if we do it on Friday, it gives us an extra day too.
Yeah, I'll be out of town. I can call in though, but I'm away on vacation next week from Thursday on.
Okay.
Why don't we just, why don't we
I mean,
just-
hopefully it would be a short meeting theoretically, if they hit all the goals and do everything. It should just be, I don't want to say rubber stamp, but.
We give them the nod and then we're just ready to go. Sure.
Yeah.
What about Wednesday?
Just give them a nod and do
Or
it.
is that pushing it?
Yeah, Wednesday's good with
That's my
us.
problem. I'm gone the whole part of the week. I get back on Thursday evening.
You get back on Thursday. What time Thursday evening?
I'm not sure. That's just the problem.
Oh.
It seems a little early for me to make.
Unless the CAC goes before us.
Well, I was
and then
going to
we
say, have the CAC go first and then we do 8 o'clock.
go- That's a long day for those guys.
Oh, yeah, that is a long day for those guys.
Well, and that's why I suggested the earlier one, so there wouldn't be conflicts, is doing it on the
Is there an
8th.
issue with Friday?
Well, Jim's gonna be gone, he'll travel, he'd have to zoom in like you are.
Yeah, he can phone in.
Yeah, but if we did it on the 8th and started at 6, I think you're gonna have plenty of time. We could do,
Well, I'm just worried that if you do it on the 8th and the wheels come off the bus, you have no time.
I think one way or another, we're gonna find that 140 to 222,000.
148 to 222. Keep that in your head.
48 to 222.
He's got the city's money tree. He's got it.
It's just gonna roll to 1.5.
No, I think we'll have success, because we're gonna take the mayor's suggestion and look where we can take some salaries from some other areas, and we can do that legitimately, and we don't get fussed at too much by our city attorney. And so we'll see if we can come back, and there may be another way to do it.
So do it on the 8th then?
You guys tell me.
So we can win.
Because what George is gonna do is, as we get these things put together for you, then we're gonna send out the updates to you, so it'll hopefully make you more comfortable.
Actually, I guess that is a question. They can send out all of the data ahead of time, so mid-next week, so we know if we have a problem. Then we can always do an emergency session if need be.
We're going to shoot for Friday if it's going to be an emergency.
Yeah.
Why don't we do that? Set it for the 8th, and if it turns out to be an emergency, we'll come in on Friday.
Yeah, let's do that.
You could do that. And just so I think everyone might be missing, if you don't remember, on that Thursday, you're just presenting a budget, so you can't change anything, so you've got to do it in advance. I guess that's what you know. But you could just set an emergency meeting. You could send it out. Why don't you set it tentative right now and just call it emergency, 48 hours? It's up to you.
But that way we can look at it on
Like
Thursday.
if they get us something by Wednesday, end of day,
Right, we have Thursday to look at it and we can decide
and
Thursday if
then
we're going to do it.
we can call an emergency session Thursday for Friday, and then we can come in if need be.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, it just reverts over to September 8th, if we're all in agreement.
How would you know? You mean anyone call the emergency? How would you make the decision, in other words?
I think anybody could under these
Okay,
circumstances.
all right.
Well, I mean, we kind of know the criteria, high level, what we're shooting for. So, and all they have to do is say, yes, we hit A, yes, we hit B.
Okay, George?
Then we're all in kind of consensus that.
And if they say no, then we want to come back and
Yeah,
talk about it.
or if they're coming back and say, Houston, we have a problem, we're not there, then we just call the emergency session.
Or he could ask for the emergency,
Yeah,
because he'll need
yeah.
it. That'll work.
Actually, we still have the LSE in place. our local state of emergency. So, I mean, that.
We'll be fine with
Not
that.
being
Yeah, we-
funny
you-
about it,
you-
but absolutely, you're absolutely right. So, if you take a look at it, or some other council person takes a look at it and says, I don't like the way it looks, it doesn't smell right, then obviously we can do that emergency meeting. But I think we're gonna be okay. I got confidence in George.
George doesn't look so happy about it, but.
He's still ticked off, and I dragged him out of his second. I dragged him out of retirement twice, and he's still ticked off at me.
I'll get to retire one of these days.
All right, so the deal is, you're gonna hit our goals, and we don't have to worry about it, and we'll just approve it September 8th. Houston, if we have a problem, then you call the emergency session for the 4th.
You got it. Yes, sir.
So, question, I assume that we're all on board with not paying the CRA any money?
Oh, yeah, I guess we should have established that too, shouldn't we?
That's good. I'm glad you brought that point up, Councilwoman.
I mean, we're all on board with that?
I think you can do it by
Yes.
consensus tonight unless our attorney tells us
The,
otherwise.
I think you got to be on board with that.
Actually, I prefer
I
technical
think so,
bankruptcy
too.
over.
Regardless of whether we went through a lot of trouble to get this professional opinion, because I could just tell you Newport Richie's in the same boat, not believing this opinion. I'd come up with it a while ago, and it's a major thing, but we're going to pass something and not do it. The worst that would happen is not, in other words, it's not like we'd have to return money to anyone. It's our money. You understand what I mean? So it's an internal issue. So I'm very confident it's not going to be a problem, but I will bring that to the next meeting. Do we need to vote on it? I'd like to vote on it before the new, at that meeting.
At that?
At the September 8th meeting.
Please,
Yeah.
yes.
Is that a separate agenda item, or is that just
It'll
going to
just
be
be
on?
an agenda, it'll be the last agenda item, and then we'll close the meeting, and I'll open up a CRA meeting and vote for the other side of it.
Okay. I think
So I
that,
assume we have a consensus, we're gonna do that, right?
We have a
correct.
consensus, we don't
Yes.
have a choice.
Well, the minor detail.
But I still think we have to vote on it anyways.
I think
Yes.
we just have to have a consensus and
Well, we
then
have a
vote on it
consensus
later.
today that we're
Today.
going to do that, and then we vote on it next week.
Yeah, you can't vote at a workshop.
We're not voting, we're just agreeing.
Just consensus, yeah,
We're
you
not.
can't like raise and vote and say we're going to do something. Yeah, you just do a consensus and we'll do it.
I assume we have a consensus.
It's a workshop.
We do.
We do.
Vice Mayor Detmer, any issues?
Yes, no, I'm good.
Okay. So I think by consensus, that's where we're at. With that, I think looking for a motion.
Adjourn. Motion to adjourn.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
you-
sorry, I
Sorry.
apologize.
Oh,
Almost forgot. Mr. Mueller, come on up.
Thank you. Dave Mueller, 5439 Blue Point. Todd, you hit all my points. What can I say? I do have some ideas. Potentially, we have a head count or an FTE report. Don't know how many vacancies are there. I think there are a few. That would be one way to get your number, is to freeze all vacancies going forward. If things improved, if revenue comes in from other sources, you can certainly turn on the gas later. Other ideas. Sounds like there's some contracts that somebody needs to dig into, potentially. Maybe we can renegotiate some rates there. Big Sur or IT folks, I guess, that might be a possibility. With regard to the union, I don't know which union this is. If it's the police, I brought up the issue with potentially looking at not commuting our cars. If we did that, parked them, that's going to save fuel and expense. Ideas there. Also, I noticed there's overtime on weekends. Maybe we can look at, we're a 7x24 city. Potentially, we could look at spreading the workload over the week, and people will have to pick up weekend shifts, a Saturday, and get the luxury of having a weekday off, because there's nobody on the water. I think that's it. I would like to see a better presentation. I think this is better than the last one. Potentially, what Todd was doing a delta between each line item in our budget. And those areas that had a large variance year over year should come with an explanation as what's the main drivers there. They're either a new contract or a new insurance rate. All those things could be highlighted and potentially avoid some of the discussion here. I realize that our guy, George over here, is working the best he can, but potentially going forward, maybe it'd be a good opportunity to put a format together that everybody's comfortable with, that helps explain that in a concise manner. That way you guys are, zeroed in on the issues. And I think that's about it. Thank you guys very much.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Mueller. With that, I'll look for a motion.
I already motioned, right? I think
And a
we're-
second.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.